Hello strangers and story lovers, and welcome to my lair. Today we're talking about Godkiller by Hannah Kaina, the first book in the Fallen Gods saga. I liked it. I liked it a lot. It pleased me. It was good. As per the now usual, I will start with the spoiler-free section at the beginning of the review where I will just share my general thoughts without any spoilers. And then, after that, in the second part, I will spoil everything, but fear not, I will let you know when to jump off. And on that note, let's start with my thoughts on book one, spoiler-free zone. Let's start with the story. As a child, Kissen saw her family murdered by a god. Now, gods are forbidden, but they still wander the kingdom demanding worship and sacrifice. Kissen makes a living killing them and enjoys it, until she meets a god she cannot kill. Skedi, the god of white lies, has bonded his soul to a young noble girl, and Kissen can't kill him without ending the girl's life. Kissen reluctantly agrees to travel to the ruined city of Blenraden to demand aid from the last wild gods. But the city of the gods is no place for a god killer. So basically, we're following a bunch of cool characters on their journey to find old wild gods to grant them their wishes. All of that in a kingdom that has made gods illegal and pays Godkiller to destroy their shrines. So already, I think the setting is really cool. Like, gods are illegal. That sounds like fun. I genuinely enjoyed reading it. It was fun, it was well written, the characters were cool, the emotions, when it hits, it hits hard. And yeah, to be honest, at the risk of sounding completely biased, I can't really think of anything that I didn't like while reading, so I'll just start with the positive points straight away. Main one, the characters. I really like them. I like the four main characters. So first we have Kissen, whom I would say is probably the mainest character out of the four. She's the Godkiller whose family was killed at the beginning of the book. And that's not a spoiler. That is the prologue. Then we have Inara, who is the young noble girl whose fate is tied to Skedi's, the god of white lies. And last but absolutely not least, we have Elo, the honorable knight who's on a quest to save the king. And I loved Elo. What can I say? I do love a goody two shoes who's trying to always do the best thing, so I had to love him. I also really liked Kissen, even though I have to admit that I took a little bit more time warming up to her, although of no fault of her own. She's just the kind of non-apologetic, no-nonsense badass that sounds great on paper, but in a lot of story, I actually find that they can just go in one of two ways. Either they work really well and I absolutely adore them, or they just kind of end up failing miserably and they become this shell of a character who's just there to be crass and starts a fight in a pub, and they can quite easily end up feeling super shallow. So yeah, I find her type of character can really be overdone and fall a little bit flat. But honestly, with her, no, she's great. She has a nice personality on top of being a badass, which is nice. We like that. I mean, she's interesting, she has layers, and she is shown as being caring in her own way without ever losing her edge, which is another thing that this type of strong female character can kind of end up doing. Like, the moment you start realizing that, oh yeah, she has more personality to her than just being this like badass crass person, they can fall into the other extreme of like becoming this overbearing, too caring character who has nothing to do with the person they started off being. But with Kissen, again, I find that you really find this good balance of, no, she's like, she is this badass, but she's also very caring, and like they're not mutually exclusive. So yeah, I ended up liking her a lot. She's very cool. Then you have Inara, who is also very cool. Again, had a bit more of a hard time warming up to her because, like, she's a 12-year-old, so at first I'm already like, not a fan of children and stories, but okay. And, I mean, I didn't mind her. She starts off a little bit timid and weak, but you know, nothing wrong with that. But the thing that I really like about her is that she grows. She's thrown in a very difficult situation at the beginning of the book, and she has a rough time. It takes her a while to get back on track, but she just grows a lot. I kind of like also how it's showed that in the story she starts taking Kissen as a model, and it's shown in ways that are kind of nice. The characters are well portrayed enough that at some point she will say something, and I will be like, oh, that is Kissen's influence, and the story doesn't even have to like over explain it. It will sometimes and be like, have Elo react as, oh, this is something Kissen would say, and I was, every time I was just like, yeah, thanks, Elo, I could tell. Which is a good sign because it shows just how fleshed out the characters feel. So yeah, Inara starts off a little timid and weak, which is fine, like characters are allowed to be like that, but it is just very nice and pleasant to see her grow and learn to take care of herself. And then you have Skedi, the little god of white light. He's so cute. I don't know what it is about him that's so cute other than the fact that he's a rabbit with wings and antlers. It's just like, can you make it a plushie? Like, that sounds like the obvious thing to do. Where is my Skedi plushie, please? Thank you. And he can also change size. And usually he gets like smaller when he's scared, so he gets like super small. I call. And personality-wise, he's interesting too, don't get me wrong. But he's a rabbit with antlers and wings. What do you want from me? Second thing that I really enjoyed in this book, the emotions. Man, when this book wants to get emotional, it delivers. I was on the edge of my seat so many times. Even just the prologue. No spoiler, it's literally just the prologue. Also, it's in some of the summaries of the book. I don't want to hear anything. You know, it's kind of your typical, the main character's family gets killed, so they have to go on an adventure kind of prologue. But, damn. This is proof that when it comes to tropes, execution is everything. That scene spares you nothing. You will watch them burn. And no, literally, that is not a metaphor. You see the mother trying to comfort her dying children. You see the brother thrashing and cussing at the people who are doing this to them. And then you see his struggles and his fights just weaken as he slowly burns. The father doing whatever he can to at least save one child if he can't save more. And Kissen, the main character, just battling with everything she has to free herself. Like, she's biting at the ropes to the point that her teeth start bleeding or whatever. Like, just very intense. But not gratuitous. It's like, it feels as much of a punch in the stomach as it is for the main character, so you're really just with them on the journey. There's also another scene later in the book that involves Skedi and Inara, and I won't say exactly what's going on here because it's still spoiler free, but when you read and you get to that scene, you will probably recognize it at this scene that I'm talking about now. Because, yeah, emotionally it just packs a punch, and when I read it I was just like, excuse me, what? And it really got me angry at the character I was supposed to be angry at, and then in the next second I was just like, oh my god, I forgive you. Which is insane. It's just like, these characters are just that good, and the emotions are just like so intense and well written. It's like, it's intense, but yeah, it still has some subtlety, if that makes sense. And damn, when the final plot twists, it's plot twists. That ending was just so crazy and intense. I was just like, I'm sorry, what? Again, like, I know I'm being very vague, but spoiler-free section. I will detail that later in the review if you're interested in knowing more explicitly. Otherwise, you know, just go read it and you will understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, anyway, who gave you the right to toy with my emotions like this? And don't you say me when I open the book. I will have none of that attitude. Third thing I would like to mention in the things that I enjoyed, the world. I thought the world was very compelling with just like these gods popping here and there and just like being prayer addicts wanting to like receive people's prayers and wishes and offerings and sacrifices. I thought that was pretty cool. And it feels like for a fair chunk of the story, it kind of almost felt like a road trip between the four main characters, like just describing their journey to this city of Blenraden where the old gods are. And so because it's a road trip, it was very interesting to be able to see the little bit of snippets of culture across the different places. Like terms of endearment from a specific region or an accent that gives away a character's origin or neat little stuff like that. That was nice. Last but not least, the style. I really, really like the style. I don't know if it's for everyone. I know some people might prefer the kind of flowery, purple prose kind of style. For me, I like something a bit more direct. Something that is not over flowery. Something that's not over flowery. Flowery. I like it when it goes straight to the point, but just uses the right word to describe exactly what you feel or what the characters feel. I think because it's so to the point, it can create these really strong moments where actions speak louder than words. And you don't just end up drowning in word vomit to explicit exactly what characters are feeling just because it's so direct, it packs a punch, and you just need like one or two sentences and you're like, yeah, okay, I know exactly what this character is going through, and it's messed up in all the right ways. But I think that's already it for my spoiler-free section, so people who want to read the book and don't want spoilers, I think you should drop out now. Yes, I know, it was very quick, but it's just what happens when I like a book. I don't feel the need to vent for hours. I can just say like, yeah, it was amazing, thanks, and I will have some again, and that's it. So yeah, at this point, if you don't want spoilers, see ya my lovelies, I love you, thank you for staying for a while. Leave a like please, subscribe if you want to see more of my face, and come back once you're done with the book, and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I did. And for those who have read the book or don't mind the spoilers, you know, grab some tea or another drink of your choosing, and let's get this going. We start with the prologue Straight from Hell, where we are introduced to this cute little family who worship the god of the ocean, Osidisen, and then we watch them burn. As their lovely neighbors invades their home, tie them up, and burns their house down with them inside, as an offering to the fire goddess Hetheth, whose name I will pronounce wrong every time, and I am sorry. Kissen, our main character, is part of the unfortunate family, and as her house burns down with her family inside, she really tries to fight back and free herself, and then free her family, and so she starts with her dad, and as she manages to free him, unfortunately, a beam falls on her leg. So her dad cuts off her leg to free her and then throws her in the ocean and gives his own life to the ocean god Osidisen to keep her safe. Yeah, okay, no, this is what happens. I wasn't expecting a slap in the face as soon as I opened the book. Thank you very much. But yeah, After that, we find Kissen again years later, and she is now a Godkiller, also known as a Vega, and she has a prosthetic as her leg, which is cool, good for her. Either way, we find her in the kingdom of Midran, which is a kingdom that has recently made gods illegal after their victory in a war against the city of Blenraden, where the royal family of Midran was fighting against the old wild gods of Blenraden, and in that battle war, most of the royal family got wiped out, except the now King Aaron. Anyway, Kissen is now a badass god killer who kills God and destroys the shrine for a living. And we watch her do exactly that at the beginning of chapter 1, where she takes on a young river god. And so once she wins her battle against said god, she goes back to the closest town that gives her her money, and she stays a little bit to go to the tavern to just grab a few drinks and hit on the local barmaid. And that is also where a young noble girl comes to her to ask her for help because she has issues with that most fluffiest, cutest, adorable. So this girl who seems to have a problem with a god who has attached himself to her and kind of basically uses her as his shrine. It seems like his own shrine has been destroyed and now he's just attached himself to her and he just doesn't really remember what happened to him. So they basically just want for Kissen to help them get separated so they can just all both move on with their life. At first, Kissen just kind of wants to kill the god and be done with it, but then she realizes that maybe if she does that, the girl won't survive. So she decides not to do that, which is very kind of her. So she decides to take Inara and Skedi set to the Crayer house because it seems like Inara is the daughter of Lady Crayer, even though apparently in the local town no one seems to be aware that Lady Crayer has a daughter. Suspicious. But when they arrive, the house is on fire, and Inara has basically lost everything. Her family, her home, her friends, everything. Of course, Kissen is particularly receptive to the problem of having all your family and home torched up into one big fire, so she decides to help poor little Inara, and she takes her to her home in Leskia, where she introduces her to her adoptive sister, Yato, and Yato's wife, Tel. They're both pretty cool. After some research, they realize that Inara and Skedi's best hope is probably to take Skedi to the ruined city of Blenraden, where they will be able to hopefully find Skedi a new shrine. Meanwhile, we are introduced to a hot knight called Elogast, Elo for friends, who has retired and is now a baker in a small mining town. He gets a visit from King Aaron, who turns out is his childhood friend, his brother in arms, and I ship it. We learn through their exchange that they have fought together in a battle in Blenraden, and it seems like Elo is still very much traumatized by what happened there. It's actually the reason that he retired so young is because of the trauma of what happened in Blenraden. But Aaron begs him to go on one last mission to save Aaron by going to Blenraden to beg an old god to save his life. Because you see, Aaron was brutally attacked during the war, and by all means he should have died if not for the goddess of Hearth, Hathra, who saved his life by giving him a glowing red heart. or something. That was a bit like, does he actually have like a... Anyway, she saved his life. And so now the heart that Hertra gave to Aaron seems to be weakening. So long story short, Elo now needs to go to Blenraden to find a new god who will be able to hopefully save Aaron's life. So of course, as the kind and loyal and honorable and honest and sexy knight as he is, Elo accepts to save his king and friend. And in this moment, Aaron also reveals that there's a rebellion on the rise against him, and that he could be overthrown, and that would be really, 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 really bad. So Elo gets on his merry way and go meet a guy called Canavan who helps people sneak into Blenraden, because Blenraden is technically forbidden. Like, you're not supposed to go to Blenraden if you're not a knight. It's been completely shut off. Since gods are illegal, this is the last place where gods are still technically existing legally. So people are not allowed there. But some people still believe in gods, and so they want to take pilgrimage, and Canavan is their guy. But, you know, knights are the soldiers that support the crown. The crown is the person who made gods illegal, so a knight on a pilgrimage, that would be a little bit frowned upon. So Canavan seems to kind of be onto Elo, like he's very suspicious of him, and he's just like, not sure about this handsome fellow. Could he have something to hide? But in the end, Elo manages to just kind of hide the fact that he's a knight, and Canavan agrees to escort him and other people to Blenraden. Coincidentally, Canavan is also the guy that Kissen and Inara go to sneak into Blenraden, so yay! The characters are together! Our characters are finally together, united for our greatest pleasure. So satisfying. So the pilgrimage begins, we get introduced to a few new characters, everyone's cool, they're chatting, characters get fleshed out a bit, there's a good atmosphere, everything's fine. Elo and Kissen are a little bit suspicious of each other, like they're both noticing that they seem to be more than they're admitting to be. Because yes, Kissen is hiding the fact that she's a Godkiller, because same logic as for the knight, a Godkiller on a pilgrimage to meet gods, kind of frowned upon. So there's some tension, but it's still all good and fun. Until a moment where a shadowy monster attacks the group. Kissen and Elo fight the monster back, but it's too late. The creature managed to kill one of their companion, a young bard who ends up dying a gruesome death. And I have to say, I'm quite impressed, because that was like a tertiary character that I had just met. I didn't particularly care about him, but yet his death is given like enough gravitas without being overplayed. But yeah, there's enough seriousness and just talent in the description of what's going on and everyone's reaction that I felt it. Like, I wasn't overly sad, but I could feel the sadness and the shock of the characters are just like, wow, this fun little camping trip is getting real, and just the realization that they're not going to be able to save him and they just have to watch him not make it while trying to give him as much comfort in his last moments as possible. Yeah, that was good. And that's what I mean when I say that in this book, the emotions, they pack a punch. Every time I'm supposed to feel something, I feel it. The emotion is just on point, and the tone is just where it needs to be. Hats off, honestly. It's everything I love and more. After that battle, though, Elo and Kissen are even more suspicious of each other, because they both showed a bit more prowess in battle than their cover story gives them any right to. Although I don't know, Kissen, I feel like you're being very unfair to bakers. But anyway, all's not well in our charming little camping trip, because a few days later, Not only does the shadow monster come back, there are now 2 of them. And because of that attack, Kissen, Inara, and Skedi get separated from the rest of the group. We also get a little bit of an explanation as to what those shadows are. They're called summonings, and Elo kind of thinks they're after Kissen because he thinks she was cursed and that this curse is something that draws these monsters to her. And every other night they're gonna keep coming, and there's going to be double the amount of the previous day. So not good. Elo kind of explains that the reason he thinks he's not the one who's been targeted is because you apparently need to get quite close physically to a person to be able to cast such a curse, and he's just like, oh, no, I haven't been close to anyone for that long, so he thinks it has to be Kissen. But they have no proof, so they end up traveling together anyways. But yeah, as I explained, with every attack, the number of the shadows grow, so it's really, really bad, and they need to hurry up to Blanraden, because if they find a god, maybe they might be able to ask this god to help them with this curse. So yeah, the clock is ticking. Skedi is of course kind of uncomfortable at the idea of traveling with Kissen, a Godkiller who doesn't seem to like him much and has kind of implied that she would rather just, like, you know. So in his mind, he would really much prefer to just dump her and keep traveling with Elo. And as a god of white lies, he has a pretty neat power that comes in handy quite a few times during the book, that he can basically convince people who are not really paying that much attention that what he thinks and pushes into their mind is true. So he can basically convince people of lies. And so at some point, because of his connection to Inara, he manages to take control of her body and get to Elo and convince Elo that Kissen is very dangerous to the 3 of them and that he needs to take Inara away. So Inara is absolutely horrified that her friend Skedi is betraying her trust in such a horrible way, controlling her body and not giving her a choice in this situation, even though she likes Kissen and she wants to stay with her as well. So it's a really tough scene to read. So Skedi is just completely drunk on power and thinking that he knows best, and he's just like, no, Inara, it's fine, like, I'll do this and it'll be for the best and blah blah blah. But he's also just like a little bit drunk on power, and he's just like, yeah, haha, I can do it, you stupid mortals, like, I can convince you of doing what I want and blah blah blah. And so there is just this moment of pure tension where Inara is just terrified in her own body, unable to do anything, while Skedi is just drunk on power and just like controlling her like a little puppet. So he creates a fight between Kissen and Elo, because Elo is trying to then take Inara away, and Kissen is just like, I don't think so. So they duel and everything, and at some point Inara is just like so terrified but just like determined that she manages to break out of Skedi's control, which she shouldn't be able to do, by the way. And she is pissed. How dares he control her and break her trust like that? And Skedi is just horrified. Yes, indeed, how could he do that? But he just wanted them to be safe, and he just like was scared, and he thought he was doing something positive in the long run, and his power just got to his head. And this scene. This was so good. Like, it's such a good scene. Like, the drama. Like, I couldn't stop reading this scene because it's just the emotions are so strong. Like, the horror Inara is feeling, I was feeling it too, like, in my gut. It's horrible what Skedi is doing, and while I was reading it, I was just like, oh my god, Skedi, that's horrible. How can you do this to your friend? How freaking dare you? But the second Inara starts yelling at him and tells him, oh my god, I will never be able to trust you again, and he's just like cowering in fear, and like he's physically shrinking. He feels so bad about it, and I was just like, oh my god, forgive him already. He's so small. And yeah, I somehow felt bad for him, even though it was like 100% his fault. And then Inara is just mad at him for like a good chunk of the rest of the book, even when at some point he just jumps into a fight and risks his life to save her. She doesn't just go like, oh my god, you did this, I forgive you. She just goes like, oh wow, you do love me. You took a huge risk there. You risked your life for me, so yeah, okay, I guess I'll try to forgive you. And this is so good. This is just so good. More of that, please. Anyway, at some point, the group decides to bathe in a river because they stink. We get a little bit of a build-up of a romance between Kissen and Elo as they just kind of take some time to appreciate each other's physique. And then Kissen notices something on Elo's back. He's actually the one who's been cursed and who the summonings are following. And Elo is just baffled. He's just like, but I haven't been close to anyone lately that could have put this curse on me. And this is where I thought, yes, you have been very close to someone recently. Aaron! Did Aaron betray him? Oh my, are we having a best friends, almost brothers to enemies plot here? Is this Christmas? Yes, please, sir. Yes, give it to me. What do you mean it's not Aaron? Canavan? That guy Canavan nobody cares about. Okay. You're not off the hook, Aaron. So yeah, Elo is flabbergasted. Seems like that guy Canavan did put a curse on him. I'm a little disappointed, but it's fine. Anyway, so now Elo kind of suggests that Kissen, Skedi, and Inara just keep going on their merry way without him, because at some point there will be just too many summonings for even the four of them to handle. So he's just like, well, I don't want to be responsible for this kind of thing, so if you want to go without me, feel free. But yeah, they also know that there is no way in hell that he will be able to fend off the shadows on his own, so it's very sad. So they decide to stay with him, but he's still very sad, and it's heartbreaking to see him like this, where he's realizing that at the end of the day, no matter what he does, he will always have this curse with him, and there will come a point where he just won't be able to defend himself. So most likely he will die. It basically creates another ticking clock for him, because he's like, well, I have to die regardless now, so the last thing I can do is just go to Blenrad and save my friend with the time I have left. Legit broke my heart, this book. But Kissen and Inara decide to keep traveling with him, at least until the next shadows come along. Kissen has a little bit of a plan to help him, potentially, so she takes them to an old river goddess named Anne, who's pretty cool. We don't really get a reason why Kissen is friends with a goddess as a Godkiller, but apparently it was like her mentor who introduced them. Not really sure if we'll have her hear more on this story. I was a bit curious, but she's friends with a goddess. Okay. So after a nice conversation, Anne asks for Inara's hair in exchange of information regarding what to do with Skedi. And basically, if they kind of swap hair, apparently for some reason, it'll mean they keep in touch and they'll be able to communicate, which is a pretty sweet deal and means that we'll probably get to see more of Anne in the future, which I'm fine with. So anyway, Inara gives her a hair. Okay, so Anne tells Inara and Skedi that yes, they can get separated, but what what's the most likely to happen is that Skedi will just be a god without a shrine in Blenraden, and most likely he will just shrivel away on his own in Blenraden, which is not ideal. And after that, Kissen, Inara, and Skedi decide to leave Elo and Anne alone so Elo can ask her about his own situation. But Kissen asks Skedi to spy on the whole situation, and Skedi does, and he learns two things. One, Anne cannot remove Elo's curse, but she can lessen it, so the shadows will keep attacking him, but maybe not as often or maybe not as many. So at least it won't be like 20. Two, yes, he might be able to save Aaron, but he will need a sacrifice. So of course, Skedi is absolutely terrified of Elo now, and he gets back to Kissen and explains everything, and so now they are both convinced that Elo will try to sacrifice one of them. I'm sorry, have you met the guy? He's basically the biggest goody two shoes that has ever goody two shoed. At which point did you think that he would sacrifice someone before designating himself as the sacrifice? Of course, he's gonna sacrifice himself. Luckily, Kissen is only a little bit of an idiot, and she puts together very quickly that Elo is going to sacrifice himself and not one of them. So there's only a very brief confrontation where they call out Elo for trying to sacrifice one of them, and then Kissen just realizes what's going on. And oh my god, I love this scene so much. Like, Kissen chuckled, pulling her hand back. "Don't tell me white lies," she said. "A heart for a heart. Whose heart is worth your king's? Because if you want one of ours, you'll find they don't come so easily." Elo was silent. The fire crackled as it caught. Skedi almost felt the snap of Kissen's breath as she squared her shoulders. "Absolutely the fuck not," she said. "I don't remember asking your opinion. I won't let you." Honestly, so beautiful. It doesn't, like, I just love how simple and straight to the point it is. Like, everything is left untold, and that's what makes it so nice to me. It doesn't even have to say that she suddenly realizes, you just get it. You just need that one moment of silence between them with the fire crackling just in that moment and the shift of tension, and you understand that suddenly she gets it. Amazing. 10 out of 10. Would read again. Anyway, Kissen gets upset with Elo that he wants to sacrifice himself, and she tells him that no king is worth him giving his own life. So after that, they bang, and the next day Kissen wakes up alone in bed, realizing that the guy she just did the nasties with is off to sacrifice himself in the name of the king. Ugh, how many times have women heard that excuse, am I right? So Kissen, like the badass she is, decides to go save Elo from his self-sacrificing antiques. Which is a good thing, all in all, because Elo decides, of all gods, to summon Seth, the goddess of fire. So he offers himself as a sacrifice to Seth in order to save his friend Aaron. And lo and behold, he's not actually the one sacrificing himself to save Aaron. Aaron is actually the one sacrificing Elo to become a god. It was all a nasty plan, and he betrayed Elo's trust. How can you do this to us, you absolute monster? I love it. Also, quick side note, Aaron is also the one who burned out Inara's house. Lunatic. Absolute monsters. So Aaron was actually a raging lunatic all along, just like banning all the gods, just so ultimately he could become one of the only gods alive along with Seth and Hertra, whatever her name is. But just as Aaron is about to complete the sacrifice of his best friend, his brother in arms, and just as he's about to do that, Kissen comes in and saves Elo. Good girl. And Kissen recognizes her old enemy, Seth, who doesn't recognize her back, but bitch, you're about to find out. Kissen tells Elo, Inara, and Skedi to just run away while she battles Seth and buys them enough time to go, and they don't really want to, but at the end of the day, they know she's right. They need to get away because they need to tell whoever is willing to listen that the king is completely off his meds, wanting to become a god, and they're the only ones who know, so someone has to make it out, and Kissen has a score to settle, my dears. So, with lots of regrets, they do end up leaving Kissen to her pretty much lost battle against a fire goddess. The battle is tough, almost impossible, but Kissen is smart. So she ends up dragging Seth off a cliff. They both fall into the ocean, where Kissen calls upon Osidisen and asks him to crush their old nemesis. And he does, and it's awesome. The water changed. Kissen still had enough instinct from her youth to know it was time to let go. She released Seth and kicked back. Before Seth could move, the sea churned around her and contracted, slamming into her on both sides with a citizen's will, force enough to quench her in an instant. Seth was gone, only a trace of burned blood seeping through the current. In Midrin, in Talicia, all of her shrines would have cracked, shattered, their bells breaking, their flames put out. Yes. And then after that, Kissen is basically ready to let herself die. She could actually get Osidisen to save her because that favor that her father got for her years back when he gave his life to Osidisen to save her, she never actually cashed that in, so she could technically do it now and be saved, but she doesn't really want to do it because she feels like this is her last tie to her father and she kind of wants to keep him. And she also just kind of wants to say, you know, fuck you to a citizen. She kind of just wants to stick it to him with her last breath. But then she remembers Inara making her promise never to abandon her, and Kissen decides to ask Osidisen to save her for Inara's sake. Osidisen watched her sink, the last bubbles of air floating to the surface where the sun danced. She was dying, Kissen knew. At least she wasn't burning. You have become a strange thing, little girl, Osidisen said, taking her into his arms. Named for me and hating me, Kisena, born on the love of the sea. Will you die, still, for bitterness? Kissen closed her eyes. She was too weak and dazed to move, her right leg weighing her down. She could not save herself, but she would not call on him, not Osidisen. She would not use the last remnant of her father's life. The promise would die with her. The god would not like it, a boon unfulfilled, but he would drift on. That was all she could do. Hold on to her father's wish and annoy him. You promised. It was not Osidissen's, but Inara's voice that sounded in her head. Inara, a strange girl alone in a dangerous world on the edge of ruin, without family, full of fear and anger. No, Kissen would not leave Inara to the life she had. Not for bitterness. Her father wouldn't have wanted that. Osidisen, she called, opening her eyes. The promise on her chest blossomed with sea light, green and dim and deep. Osidisen waited. Save me. Ah, this is so good! The betrayal, the drama, the epicness, the everything. Such a good end for a book. I love it. So yeah, Kissen's alive, but Inara, Elo, and Skedi don't know that. They think she's still dead. Aaron betrayed Elo and he's a maniac who wants to become a god. Beautiful. You bet that I will be reading book 2. But yeah, that's it for the story. Now let's move on to the characters. And let's start with Kissen. Like I said at the beginning, it took me a little bit of time to warm up to Kissen, but in the end, yeah, she's great. She's a bit brash, she's a badass, she loves to flirt, she loves to fight, I guess. She's very confident, but she can also be very caring in her own way. For example, there's a scene right after Inara's family was, well, brutally murdered, and she takes her to her friend Yato, and Yato doesn't really know, and so her and her wife just kind of talk normally about, like, Inara's family, and Kissen just kind of wants them to stop. So she says, oh yeah, her family's dead. And it feels very inconsiderate from the outside, but because you have Kissen's perspective, in her head she's just like, well, they need to know to stop talking about it because it hurts Inara, so I'll just say it. And in her head, she doesn't really see a problem with being super direct about it because she's just like, well, life will punch you in the face, so it doesn't matter how much I cover the fist that punches you, it's still going to hurt. So you might as well just take it and learn. So she doesn't really see a point in sugarcoating everything, and to her, that's her own form of caring. And I mean, yeah, of course, I do love me a good badass babe, so I guess as long as you deliver with a nice personality on top of that, of course I'm gonna love her. And yeah, I did end up loving her a lot. Like, she's just like very caring in her own direct, no nonsense way. But now let's talk about Elo. I know it's going a little bit quick, but yeah, I don't know, I just love them, so I don't need to complain for hours. I think Elo was my favorite character. What can I say? I love a goody two shoes. I loved his calm and composed demeanor. He's just very competent and relaxing kind of guy. I guess he has a little bit of an edge to him, but not that much. He's kind and loyal, and you can tell that he has a lot of inner strength. And I just love his just determination, especially at the end when he's told that he will need to sacrifice someone for Aaron, and not only does he know he's gonna do it, he knows he's just gonna sacrifice himself because that's what he has to give. And I love that it's just like a bitter pill to swallow, but it also just makes sense to him, and he doesn't even have to hesitate a second. It's not, there's no debate. He's just like, yep, this is what I have to do, I'll do it. He is sad. It's not like he doesn't care. It's just that saving Aaron to him is the obvious choice, which makes it hurt all the more that you can see that Aaron would 100% sacrifice him, not just to save his life, but just to like become a god. Like, it's not even saving himself. It's just like, yeah, a nice bonus. How can you do this to your childhood friend who would just die for you, like, without even any question? That was just so good. Like, this is the rare occasion where I absolutely love having my heart broken. The friendship between them is just so well established. Like, at first when they have like these conversations and you see how close they are to one another, and then with the fact that Elo is just like, yeah, of course I'll save him, he's my friend, he's my brother. And when he knows at some point that he's gonna die, he's just like, well, with what life I have left, the only thing I can do now is save him, so that's what I'll do. So you can tell just how much, at least Elo cares about Aaron. Aaron is like, but you assume as well that he does care about him because it's implied at the end that in order to become a god, he has to sacrifice something he really cares about. So yeah, it's established that they really care about each other, and so the fact that he would still just go and betray him just to... But yeah, it's just, I do love that. Like I said, it's the one time where I absolutely will have my heart broken and enjoy it and ask for more. Thank you. I just love those very complex relationship between characters when there's just so much love but also so much like resentment and bitterness and sometimes hatred, and it's just like so much of everything. So I just am really hyped to see how it's going to go in book two, especially between those two. Like, how is Ella going to cope with it? How are their next interactions going to be? I just can't wait to like sink my teeth into that book. Yeah, honestly, that ending left me feeling like I had ran a marathon. I was just so invested, so into it. Like, I was really on the edge of my seat the whole time. And I just cannot wait to get my hands on book two so I can just see how their relationship is going to evolve from there. Like, and I cannot express enough how much I want Elo to absolutely destroy Aaron. But now let's talk about Inara. She's probably the character that I'm the least invested in. Not because she's not good, just because, well, she has tough competition. She's your sweet little noble girl, quite timid, I guess, at the beginning, doesn't really know what to do with herself. She gets to meet Kissen and she just grows from there under her care. And you can tell that Kissen has a huge influence on her. Like I said, they don't even need to say it. Like, sometimes she's just gonna say something and you're just like, hi, Kissen. And it's pretty sweet. She becomes a little bit of a badass in her own right. At some point, Kissen tries to teach her how to hunt, and it's revealed that actually Inara can already use a bow and arrows better than Kissen can. She just needs to be taught the confidence to use the skill. But yeah, after that, once that's discovered, she even starts fighting the monsters alongside Kissen and Elo, and she 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 kicks ass. I really like her relationship with Skedi as well. It's also well established from the beginning that they really are close friends. They've always been together and they want to like separate from each other so they can just go both do their own thing. But there is a moment where Skedi feels almost a bit too eager to be separated from her, and she becomes a little bit sulky, and she's like, didn't realize that it was so bad to be with me all the time. You can tell that she's a little bit hurt sometimes that he wants to be parted from her. And again, that makes the scene where he takes control of her body, like that betrayal, hurt all the more for her and for the reader. That scene is excellent as well. Like, you can tell just how scared she is of Skedi taking control of her. And I loved that she didn't forgive him straight away. I love when forgiveness is like hard to get. Like, I love when it's earned. It also seems like Inara has some powers where she can, I don't know, command gods or something, because there's this one scene where she manages to break out of Skedi's command, but there's also another scene later on when they're in Blenraden where there's a old god trying to attack them. Well, not an old god, but there's a god trying to attack them, and she actually manages to like make it go away. So yeah, I'm very curious what's her secret and what the story has in store for her in book two as well. And now, last but not least, let's talk about Skedi. I really do like Skedi. Like, again, first of all, the design. A rabbit with wings and antlers. Where's my Skedi plushie? And the fact that he can change size too. Stupidly brilliant. The moment where he becomes bigger to fight those monsters, I was just like, that's awesome. Like, Skedi is fighting, and like, yes, he has antlers, of course he could be such a badass in a fight, but also like the scene where he takes over Inara's body, and I was just like thinking, you little shithead of a god, what are you doing? Like, how can you betray your friend like this? Are you becoming the main bad guy? How am I supposed to ever forgive you? Oh my god, he's the size of a little pebble, like, forgive him. Like, how can you blame him? He's so small. The second Inara starts yelling at him and rightfully calling him out for what he's just done, and he just starts cowering in fear and just like shrinks in terror and tries to hide, I'm just like, but how can you blame him? Like, look, he's so small. And ultimately, I'm glad she didn't forgive him. And yes, this 12-year-old girl is stronger than I am, and I'm fine with that. It also sounds like Skedi has lost his memories of his life before he met Inara and before his shrine was destroyed. So he doesn't know what happened to him before. And at the end of the book, there's a hint that he may have somehow been involved in the war and that he may be more important than we initially thought. So very curious about that as well. But that's it for Godkiller. Loved it, 10 out of 10. Can't wait to read book 2. I don't have much else to say, honestly. It was excellent. I loved it. The emotion was super intense. Loved the characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again. I can't think of anything negative to say, really. Story was great, characters were great, emotions like just probably slapped me in the face. Strong recommend. Anyway, that's it for Godkiller, so leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more of my face. Thanks for tuning in, and continue to enjoy stories.